Hello, welcome. We're back again. It is the remarkable negotiation room. And today we have yet another special guest to bring to you. Gosh, such a variety. We were talking beforehand because our friend and colleague Navisha has moved to her first home this week. I mean, she did live in a house before, but her first home of her own. And so Keld has kindly organised that we can, in fact, bring all of the guests we've had on negotiation rooms for our housewarming party at Navisha. So we're really looking forward to that. And well, one of our first beneficiaries of that invitation is, of course, our tremendous guest today, Ignas Stasiukonis, who is going to be talking to us about a subject that, Keld, you and I really are fascinated by. I think such an important topic of negotiation strategy and I think associated with that negotiation planning. And of course, it does often shock and bemuse both of us, the sort of resistance there seems to be within so many organizations to actually having a structured approach to negotiation. It's one of those things that survives as very much people's belief that it's entirely an art form, that there's nothing scientific about it, and that age-old belief that you're either born a negotiator or you're not a negotiator. So hopefully today we're going to challenge and maybe create new and different thinking on that. Now, as always, please, our audience, we would love to hear from you. Of course, we love our normal intro to these sessions. Do just say hello and tell us where you're from. It's always wonderful to see all those myriad of exotic locations popping up. Not always exotic, I suppose, because Ignas, you tell us that you have snow.
Yes. Today, first snow.
Yeah, that sounds cold.
So,
right. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ignas, for being here today. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate it because not only do I enjoy spending time with you and your company, but you're also one of the first one in your industry to actually embrace the idea of implementing a negotiation strategy. Now, why are we here today? Well, we're here today because I've been spending years on preaching that a negotiation strategy is essential. And those of you who knows me knows that I like to tease people just a tiny bit. So quite often when I'm working with a client, I'm sitting with the C-suite, and I'm often asking them very early on in the meeting, could I please see your official negotiation strategy? And what happens when I'm asking this question, Tim, is quite often there is silence for a few minutes, and then somebody might say, and the point is they don't have one. When I then ask them if they have a go-to-market strategy, a research and development strategy, an HR strategy, a communication strategy, or sales strategy, or the whole bunch of strategies that you obviously got in a company, they all say, but of course we do. And then I'm asking, but why don't you have a negotiation strategy? Negotiation being such an important topic and so essential for improving earnings in general. So one of the approaches I have to negotiation is it's really wasteful just running negotiation training for your organization if you haven't established an actually efficient, structured strategy. And Ignas, you are the COO of Staticus, one of the leading facade manufacturers in Europe, a huge player in the construction industry. So first and foremost, thank you so much, Ignas, for being here today. Could you share just a tiny bit for our audience about yourself and Staticus?
Okay, sure. Firstly, thanks a lot for inviting and this opportunity to share our journey that we had also together with you, Keld. Thanks a lot for Tim as well for hosting this. It's really an honor to share this. So a couple of words about Staticus. As Keld told, Staticus is engaged in construction industry. So for us, I would say it's a low volume of transaction, but high value transactions. So negotiation part is really important. So what we do, we actually are engaged in particular industry, construction industry, sub-industry, I would say. So design, production, and installation of building facades. So it's like buildings what you see in London, Oslo, or Stockholm. Basically, some of them are made by us. Yeah. So typical, just couple of numbers, because I really like numbers. My former background is being a CFO as well in this company, so I really love numbers. That's why I'm really how to say lover of the structured approach towards negotiation. So typical contracts that we have, sales contracts, let's say from 10 million to 50 million. One of our recent projects is quite exotic. So we are also producing facades for hospital, national hospital in Iceland, in Reykjavik. So now it's really, we are, because of the volcano eruption risk, we're all, you know, holding hands and hope nothing will happen and our work will go smoothly. So right. I think that's
great. And you're operating on several markets: Scandinavia, Britain, throughout Northern Europe in general, right?
Right. So before we had a split of 50-50, like Scandinavia took 50% of turnover and the rest went to Great Britain.
Okay, right. Perfect. Okay, Ignas, we have some hopefully great questions for you. And as Tim pointed out, the audience is very welcome to post questions in the chat as well. One question I was thinking about that I actually never asked you, Ignas, is that what motivated you originally to adopt a negotiation strategy in the organization, since I assume nobody else, neither your suppliers or your clients, have something similar to that?
Okay. So that comes from your statement that you always ask your clients during the training, do you have a negotiation strategy? I remember that question when we had training in our facility as well. So that was the second training. And during the last day of the training, we were sitting together with CEO Oshra, and I was asking, so what's the continuity of this? What's happening after this? And then we came up with this idea, you know, to build something more beyond training. So that was basically when we started the idea, started the discussion, and actually started the project. And the main motivating factors for us was the industry itself, because this kind of industry, construction industry, if you look into the numbers, the high value of transactions, it is high risk, and the profitability varies from 2% to 3%. So that's high risk, low margin business. So risk management, ability to negotiate is really, really important. So the other thing that came out, that came out from our strategy, like global corporate strategy, we have a sustainable partnership pillar, which I will explain maybe later. But that was also a driver. So that was coming from the strategy to build long-lasting relationship with partners, because what we do, we don't produce any materials. We basically buy materials, make an idea, make a solution, buy materials, assemble, and make it happen. So that's basically why it's important for us to have a relationship, collaboration with the whole supply chain, together with the clients.
Right. So obviously you're doing a lot of negotiation, both on procurement side and on sales side, perhaps even more on procurement.
I would say both. On the sales side, it's really also, how to say, complex because of the number of stakeholders or decision makers, because we have developers, general contractors, consultants, architects, and their interests are different, and you have to navigate between them. So it is really an interesting market for me. I mean, from the negotiation side especially, and deals are taking really long time, actually, from the idea of when you see the project until the contract, it can be 2-3 years. So during that time, actually, what happens? Number of rounds of negotiations, reviewing the work, etc. Yeah.
Right.
So long-term partnership is a really important thing. The other driver is also new. When we can say that there's a new currency in the world and in this market, carbon. So that's a new variable, and you alone in the supply chain cannot change anything alone. So you have to collaborate, think about new solutions, sometimes reinvent the solution, reinvent the product or service. So again, better relationship.
I do find it interesting that this is in the context of a construction sector, because of course that is well, certainly a sector that has been very accustomed to extensive negotiation for many years. But it also is one that, in a sense, although it does, we know, differ somewhat between markets in the sort of culture of the industry, it is quite an embedded and distinctive culture, and often probably quite set in its ways. It has these very clear methods that are followed, religiously. So, do you think, and there's a little bit of a head to ask you, because of course you've only tried to do this within your own industry, but do you think that that structure, that tradition has made your task easier or harder in terms of getting people to think a bit differently?
Well, that's a good question. I think, from my experience, it all depends on the people and attitude, and depends who work on your team. So we think, internally, we think that it's easier. It is easier because, there are cultural differences. There are differences in the procurement processes, especially when I talk, let's say, Scandinavia and UK. These are completely two different worlds. And also in terms of trust or level of details in the procurement. So these are different worlds, but it works for us in both markets, and I think this makes things easier. And for us, it's also important because our teams are going from one market to another, so we can be consistent as well. Because one team, either it's a performance team, either it's a salesperson, it can sell one project in Norway, the other in Iceland or in the Netherlands. So consistent approach actually helps us to, be on track, communicate internally, and actually to understand where we are in this really lengthy process.
Well, maybe I can throw a quick question at you. So you go in and you pose this question that brings the room to silence. What would you expect a good negotiation strategy to include? What is it beyond a nice sentiment?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Didn't hear it.
Well, I was actually asking Keld the question in terms of, he walks into these rooms and he says, "Have you got a negotiation strategy?" What would satisfy you, Keld? What for you would represent a negotiation strategy?
There are actually lots and lots of items in it. One of the items, a very simple one, is that the organization has defined the variables, what is negotiable. And what I often find, Tim, is that most organizations are not negotiating on all the variables that are available. So one of the things that Staticus did was they had a brainstorming session. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ignas, but let's say that Staticus was operating on 10, 15, 20 variables, commercial variables, right? That could be delivery time, warranty, installation time, price, what have you. They did a brainstorming session. I don't remember how long it was, Ignas, perhaps half a day, where we had the groups of appointed champions in Staticus sitting down and just thinking out of the box. And within that time, they came up with about 150 variables. And the next step then, Tim, is to actually quantify, capitalize those variables. Because what is really scary, and I can ask our audience that, can you actually put a value and a cost on your variables? So if I came to you and said, what is the cost of your warehouse? What is the cost of your change delivery time? What is your cost of capital? What is your cost of increasing the warranty period? What is your cost of, and it seems like very simple questions, but the fact is, Tim, quite often negotiators in an organization have no clue. So they actually don't know what is the impact if we change delivery time. What will that increase our cost or give us a benefit? So that was the next step for Staticus. They actually had to sit and quantify. And Ignas, perhaps you can elaborate on that, because you guys were really great at being creative. I have to praise you. And you came up with lots and lots of variables and identified, I believe it was 30 or 40 out of that you would actually implement in negotiation. But then came the challenge, right? Because then you had to capitalize those variables. And how did that go, Ignas? What was your experience about putting a price and a cost on a variable?
Yeah, right. That's a good question, and that was an issue for us. And each time we asked this question, so we in most cases we've got the same answer: project specific.
Yeah.
But because we made a conclusion at the very end, because we are a project organization, it is project specific. However, within the organization, we have estimators, we have procurement officers, we have bid managers that actually do the work. They estimate cost and they estimate all these variables. So we are saying it's project specific. If we have a task, we have some time, but we go and put a value on this. And really, I remember the first training with you and the magic sentence when you don't know what to do, just turn on the calculator. So we operate on the same rule. For us, it was really hard to predefine the value of the variable before the negotiation. However, when we have a particular project, we can put value on this, because then we know all the cost elements and we know what things impact our cost as well. So we're good at estimating cost when we're in the project. We're really bad when we have to say, okay, how much does it cost for us to switch the to change the order time? So that depends actually on
I do find this is really interesting. So when I was leading commercial teams in the automotive sector and then later on the aerospace, we had responsibility actually, in fact, in the automotive sector, the contracting activity, negotiation activity was part of finance. In aerospace, it wasn't, but actually it did have very clear responsibilities around pricing and costing. And obviously had, as you described, sort of an army of estimators backing it up. So getting to a decent analysis of cost impact was much easier. When I moved from there into the technology sector and worked at IBM, I remember sort of going forward with that same view. Well, look, I don't want to go into a negotiation without having an indication of cost. But trying to extract cost data was absolutely impossible. At IBM, it was not part of finance, and finance sort of took the view, no, costs are secret. So you had to negotiate completely blind. And I think that's still true with many, many organizations. So do you think the fact that you actually have a finance background, the fact that you were previously a CFO, has that been a big assist to you in actually moving forward to developing strategy?
Yes, that is correct, and that is correct, especially when we talk about numbers and when we have to put values. But as you told, our industry is, how to say, allowing us to have a separate team, department, cost expert, estimators, etc. So we have really an army of people, not an army, but a squad of people that actually are capable of doing this. However, just to add on this, of course, it's not only, you know, rainbows and unicorns. There are variables that we don't know how to value. And for example, and we had this discussion also with Keld before, ESG, sustainability part, so things that are new that we don't know how to actually put the value on those. So there are, I would say, a lot of questions still not answered.
Sure. I would also say in general, just for our audience, we are talking about objective variables and subjective variables. Objective variables are the one we can quantify, you know, cost of capital, delivery time, warehousing. The subjective one is the more emotional one, you know. Why, Tim, would you rather drive an Audi, if you do, than a BMW? Why would you rather live in this city compared to this city? Well, there might be some rational thoughts behind that, but quite often it's an emotional thing. So we shouldn't rule out that those variables exist in negotiations as well, and we should consider those as well. Ignas, could you just elaborate a tiny bit on how you actually implemented and rolled out your strategy? Just back to Tim's thought about what is actually part of a strategy plan in negotiation.
Okay, so maybe I will tell a short story how we made this project work. We call this project like implementation. So actually the whole process from the idea until rollout, it took us 4 months, I think. So the first phase, we had the first phase, which I can call variable identification and testing of these variables. So the first part, we had to select the internal team. So we had internal team of 8 people. So from various areas, both sales and purchases as well. So then after we had a team, we had this workshop where internally we generated this 150 variables. And then we also selected 3, trusted counterparts, and had separate workshops with them, trying to test these variables, whether they, you know, are valid for us only, or whether they have value for the counterpart as well. Maybe there are other variables. I think after these sessions, the number of variables really increased actually, because we are looking internally. So, and because we had 150, we couldn't start with 150 within the organization. So the next part was like prioritizing and having a shorter list, manageable list for the people to understand and start working. So we had this prioritizing part separately. So that was the first phase. The second phase actually was the internal preparation. So we had then we prepared material for internal training, material for partner training, or lists of like tailoring the list of variables. So number of documents that are available for us internally, and some of them are also for public use, external use. And then we had an internal training again, how we roll out with our internal negotiation champions, the same team. Well, we amended the team with a couple of new members, but we have internal training for the negotiation champion. And the third phase was the rollout. So firstly, we had an internal announcement. So internal company-wide presentation over the concept. So that was kind of a brief training internally for all the employees. Doesn't matter if you negotiate or no, but everybody has to know that this kind of new way of working is already in place. And the last part was the rollout externally to the public. So we had videos, we have articles, we used social channels, etc., etc. So that was our journey, which took 4 months.
Yeah. And I know, Ignas, that you had, as an organization, you had a planned target of one of the reasons that you wanted to implement the strategy in negotiation. What was a financial target, a financial goal that you went out and announced publicly? So what was your ambition? How much did you want to grow your earnings?
Well, now we have it like 2 times.
All right.
So that's a lot. But that
Right.
also it's now a combination, you know, of all the other some other operational matters, because we have strategic initiatives, and negotiation part is one of the internal efficiency initiative part.
Right.
So
I guess in the construction industry, Keld, it's gone from a negative number to a positive, and that's a critical point.
no, but
yes, that's
no, but actually, in real life, if I mentioned you the profitability of the industry, so we actually want to work 2 times more than that.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, it is obviously something that bedevils the industry and dramatically impacts time and quality. You did mention cycle time and the fact that, you know, these negotiations often go multiple rounds and take forever to conclude. Have you seen and be able to measure any significant impact when it comes to cycle time by actually having this more structured approach?
The impact is simple, because what we do each time we want to go into the project, we set a target for margin, what we want to achieve there. So basically what we are doing, increasing the target also margin, and that actually works now. So once you concluded the contract, you capture the margin, and you know how you managed to, through the whole cycle, to build, let's say, from X% to Y%. So you can see this.
Right. Ignas, you have mentioned a couple of times that you created a team of champions and negotiation champions in the organization. 2 questions, really. The first one is, why did you do that? And the second question is, how did you identify the individuals who was appointed negotiation champions?
Okay, that's a great question. That's actually for my advice for all the others. Negotiation champions are really is for us, for our companies, a critical part, because these are the people that are actually ambassadors for empowering and coaches for the people to use the strategy. So we have people both on the supply side, we have people champions on the client side as well. So it's also kind of a governance mechanism for the whole negotiation strategy, because we also have each quarter, we have with this team, we have quarterly meetings, and with them we do some retrospectives. We talk about what happened. Do we have any stories to tell, where it worked, where it didn't? Do we need to amend the list of variables or any material? So basically, it's, if you want to keep it alive, you know, you have to constantly have the feedback loop for this. So these people are actually, they also participate in negotiations, not in all of them, but they participate, they coach, so they actually have their insights, and they can provide the right feedback, what's missing, etc., etc. So this is basically, how to say, empowering team for the strategy.
And yep, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
well,
and
it is.
So we had this dilemma initially: who should be on the team? Either it's managers, heads of depth, or senior people, or the right mindset, attitude, or so-called believers open for new things. So we actually focused on the people that really like to negotiate. First thing is the first criteria. Do you like to negotiate? Because there are negotiators, as far as from what I've seen, there are negotiators who don't like to negotiate. So the first criteria, if you like to negotiate, okay, that's good. If you want to try something more, something new, yes. Do you know the concept? Yes. So motivation to try it out, openness for innovation was the main criteria for being on the team. And in some cases it was like head, but the team is mostly made from more like specialists that really are open for innovations, and that the ones that like to negotiate.
Right. Okay. Ignas, another question I have is after you have implemented the negotiation strategy, how do you feel it have changed the dynamic of your negotiation, both really internal and with suppliers and with clients?
Okay. The change is still happening because it is quite fresh. We rolled it out, I think, in May this year. So it is quite fresh. But from what we see, how it changed, it doesn't mean that we started new ways of negotiating or applying like this SMARTnership concept in every negotiation. But what we see, we use TCO, total cost of ownership, in more cases as a calculation. So that's the first thing what I've noticed. The other thing what I've noticed is we are using more variables in our negotiation. Doesn't matter if it's zero sum, if it's other concepts, but the negotiation room itself expanded.
Oh, okay. Right.
So I see it like this.
Okay, great. One thing I was just thinking about as well is that back to Tim's original question, so what is part of a negotiation strategy? If I should just give my 2 cents on that. Another important point is actually the organization deciding, are we going to be positional or collaborative? Are we going to negotiate in a more zero-sum environment? Are we going to be more opening up, being transparent, and sharing values and cost with the counterpart? And that's actually a very interesting question an organization should ask themselves. And quite often what I find is that if you have an organization with 20,000 employees, they often have 4,000 different ways of going to their negotiation because the individual is negotiating as an individual. So one of the things that we absolutely recommend everybody that want to embrace our strategy is understanding what strategies you use in what negotiation. And one thing, and it's a very easy exercise, everybody can do that, and most organizations got this already, is create a simple plan where you have a horizontal line and a vertical line. And then you basically create 4 boxes where you say, our counterpart, whether they are a supplier or whether they are a client, how important are they to us? If they are very important to us and we are very important to them, well, obviously we should be in the top right corner and we have to be collaborative, what I call SMARTnership. It's really unintelligent not being up there if both parties are equally important to each other. On the other hand, if you are in a commodity market where you have hundreds of thousands of clients and there are hundreds and thousands of suppliers as well, so the parties are really not important to each other, well, you would be down in the bottom left corner and you could purposely pick positional zero-sum orientated negotiations. So I guess, Ignas, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess not all your negotiations have turned into collaborative dealings. I mean, some of them must be still, I assume, zero-sum orientated, right?
Right, that is correct. And I will add on this collaborative approach by sharing values is actually still used in really rare cases. And it's also from our side, it's also how to say, impacted by the overall market situation right now.
Sure.
Because like now, when the market's pushing, like everyone wants to collaborate with the client and wants to beat the supplier to the death. So because the negotiation power now everybody's looking for a sale. So it is. I feel it. I feel it also from our negotiation champions, because they want to go more zero sum, because they can now. They have more power. Is it sustainable? Is it according to our strategy? No.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We've certainly been seeing and hearing a growing volume of voices from the procurement side saying, hey, we want to collaborate. How can we get our supplier to collaborate with us? And it is unfortunately so often driven by that shift of power dynamic rather than shift of culture. But I think you did touch on an important point, that a lot of the sustainability targets, for example, do create a very different new dimension to many of these negotiations, where actually, because it's new, because it requires innovation, we are going to have to be more open and collaborative. And maybe that can help us to change the tenor of that negotiation. Perhaps, do you think sometimes we just start at the wrong place? We get so fixated on the price question that we actually miss the opportunity to find room for true collaboration. Because, yes, if we're talking about work we can do together to take down overall costs so that we both benefit, yeah, that's a positive conversation. I can collaborate on that. But if we're just talking about who's going to get what share of the pie, that's not the most collaborative conversation, is it?
Yes, that's right.
Do you find we've got a really interesting point from Lee, who said, yeah, I really want one of these negotiation strategies. But it's highlighting the fact that he's in an environment where he can absolutely see the pressing need for it. But is highlighting the big question that says, how do you get organizational buy-in? Because you touched on the point that we know negotiation, contracting in general, myriad of stakeholders, all expert, all got their viewpoints. How do you corral them? Is it that you were able to do it because you were in a position of power yourself, or is it achieved by some other method?
Well, it's all about people. Firstly, what I think, if you want, is first priority is the tone at the top. So if the top executives actually demonstrated, stated, and actually in real life walk the talk, so that's the first step. The second step is the team that actually embraces and leads those. So for us, it's like negotiation champion. So it's not one person's deal, it's like a team. But the first thing is the tone at the top. And we made so many videos, we made so many conference calls together with our CEO personally to the counterparts. So that's the initial part. And then each time you're participating in any kind of procurement committee, or you're participating in any kind of a meeting where you discuss sales, you can refer to this and people hear what you say and they try, then go and try it out. So for me, I think that if there's no tone at the top, it won't work. If there's a tone at the top, gather the right team, right leaders. Yeah, so these two elements are critical. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think Juliet, in her comments, is probably reinforcing that point. She's given us a few great insights, and obviously works in an organization where they have absolutely bought into these principles. But she says, actually, interestingly, that as soon as leadership hears that there's a negotiation, they ask for the negotiation plan. And sometimes they ask for it well before we're ready to share it. So, tremendous, obviously, to have that sort of culture built in. But I think her point echoes yours, that you really do need that enthusiasm at the top. Keld, I was running a negotiation class just recently where we were talking about this, and really trying to push the benefits that this particular organization would have. We had 24 negotiators there, and they had no pattern, no consistency, didn't even have any checklists, had nothing really. They just all went into a negotiation and did what they thought was best. Really interesting, though, that they pushed back a lot on the idea of any structured plan or strategy as, that would destroy creativity. So what do you say to that?
Well, I would ask a pilot on an airplane if a checklist is destroying his creativity to fly the plane. I'm pretty sure that he would acknowledge that the checklist is kind of vital. And the reason that a checklist is vital is that we all forget. I've been doing this for many, many years now, and I still forget stuff in a negotiation. So when I leave, I'm thinking, shoot, I should have done that. I forgot to ask that. And a checklist will help us out. And obviously, a checklist shouldn't be a fanatical tool we just have to obey and follow one item after the other, but it's actually a template to generate creativity. So back to when we're talking about implementing a strategy, we really need the checklist to stimulate that creativity. We really need the checklist to expand the number of variables. We really need the checklist to create a code of conduct. We really need the checklist to understand how we move forward. And without any doubt, Tim, I can share with you that every organization that has implemented checklist and a standard approach how to negotiate, still leaving, by the way, creativity to the individual negotiators, are improving their earnings without any doubt. But I actually agree with you, Tim. I hear that as well. Well, it's going to limit my ability to negotiate. Another fun thing I just heard last week was, I recommend that you negotiate in teams. I really don't believe that individuals can negotiate efficiently. We have to be a team. And I just heard a gentleman last week saying, oh, that will just limit my ability to do well. If I have to bring other people along, it's so much easier just doing my own stuff. And what I really feel he's saying is, I'm scared of other people seeing how I am negotiating, because from a scientific and research point of view, without any doubt, we improve negotiation by being a team. So yes, there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of resistance on changing the ways that we are negotiating. And that's one of the many, many reasons why we need a negotiation strategy.
Well, we haven't done this study for a little while, and we should do it again, but we did the last time we looked at it, find a direct correlation, whether it's coincidental, come to that in a minute, but companies that have a negotiation strategy were consistently performing in the top quartile of their industry. Now, maybe that's because they just are gaining so much greater success. It's probably indicative of them just being a much more disciplined and structured company that operates overall with greater efficiency. Because, of course, Ignas, we all know that negotiation is only one part of the picture, of course, isn't it? At the end of the day, yes, having a good deal is a good bedrock, it's a foundation. But of course, good performance is what actually delivers from that foundation. So how much have you made sure that those two components really are interconnected?
Yeah. Well, we have this measurement system where we actually can separate sales performance and then project implementation performance, because these are clear two separate stages. I completely agree with you that if you look into the industry leaders, either they have really good some other technological or other competitive advantages, and they are able to maintain their margins. But I agree that ability to collaborate for an organization is also a competitive advantage, and it adds to these margins, adds adds resilience to the margins through the different market cycles as well.
Your industry, but of course any industry that has a sort of longer performance cycle, is of course so much the victim of market volatility and change. And of course the last 3 or 4 years have been, to say the least, traumatic for many industries, but certainly construction. So how and to what extent have you flowed this strategy across the organization in a way that the inevitable renegotiations are also utilizing the same discipline? I mean, have you got your project teams and so on all bought into this approach today?
Yes, right. So what I didn't mention about this team and leads, so there are project managers that lead the performance. So project managers, few of them are also on the team, negotiation champions team, and they also lead this, embrace this strategy in the project performance. And once the sales contract is done, we have number of negotiations throughout the period of the whole implementation construction. There's even, like in our industry, then there's even also a separate term for sharing, or I would say giving the value generated, so-called value engineering. It is the market term. So the value which you create, technically, if you change some solutions, you have to share it or give it away to the client as well, because facade package is performance based. So you can change, the materials, etc., by looking to the same performance. However, the difference in cost, then you have to, put it on the table. So that's industry practice from all days.
Another interesting pressure of the industry has, of course, in particular, I guess, relevant to you, following the sort of Grenfell fire, which obviously was quite a changing moment, certainly for Northern Europe, not just, but and obviously has led to legislation in the UK that actually imposes, at least in public contracting, the obligation for openness and for much greater collaboration. So are you seeing that as a driving spirit more generally in the industry that's going to help you to propel this sort of much more disciplined approach to the whole negotiation? Because it was really in that negotiation that so much that happened in Grenfell began to go wrong.
Yeah, that was a disaster, yeah. And one thing what changed after that was I would say the level of trust and then within the supply chain dropped significantly. So everybody started to control everybody, putting regulations, etc. So in general, this is now highly regulated. We have like additional safety act. We have 2 staircases for each building. So number of things. So these are prescribed. These are must. These are non-negotiable. Nothing. It's purely controlled. So, but in general, what happened after that shock was the level of trust. It really dropped.
Yeah. And I guess, Ignas, that trust is an essential part if we want to move from a very positional to a collaborative mode. How do you feel? Has the tools that you have embraced, have they changed trust in any way, or is that down to the project? Do you see, are you doing anything specifically internally to promote and increase trust with suppliers and clients, or is that happening as you go?
We are not doing anything synthetically just to, make it bigger. However, all this communication of the strategy that we had really raised topics with our existing partners, because there are number of conferences, meetings with clients or suppliers where they actually ask, what is that? Can you tell me a bit more? You tell, okay, can you train me? And then you start talking about the trust and that was the ultimate effect in partner relationship of the whole communication of the strategy. The ones that are interested in this, they ask questions. The ones that are not interested, they are silent, they are not looking into this.
Right. You mentioned earlier, Ignas, that you were running pilot projects. So you have, while you're going through the implementation of the strategy, you picked, I believe, one supplier and one client, right? And then you ran kind of a project case with them. What was your experience from doing that?
Well, the first experience was really, it was strange. The good thing was that during these workshops, we had external moderator who actually kept us on track, and that was you, Keld, basically. So, but that really helped, you know, to keep the stress low. And we had from three planned sessions, we actually had two. One was the better one, more open, like with more trust. The other was, how to say, good. So I think that, like, if I would go back in time for that, I would change my expectation in that project, that prepare that not all, you know, all workshops and sessions and efforts will be successful.
Yeah.
So if you want to have 2-3 good results,
right,
for testing, probably pick 6.
Yeah.
Just 2 times more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Ignas, what advice would you give to other leaders considering implementing a negotiation strategy? Is there anything like a summary that you could pass on, something that you would that you could give as a very important piece of advice?
Yeah, well, actually, that is my advice. Go prepare and test, but test with a bigger sample. That was basically main point, because if you sometimes you think you can build trust with some people or some companies, but actually you can't. It's like one-way perception. So you should be aware of that. So when thinking about counterparty where you want to try out the collaborative approach, think about not the side, like turnover volume, size of the company, importance in your supply chain, but think of it from the cultural and strategic side, whether the values and openness and style will be the same as yours.
All right. Okay.
So
yeah,
it might be in a small company, like, but you can go and achieve amazing result there.
So you're saying from that that's here. I mean, that again, you at the beginning said, of course, there are multiple dimensions to a negotiation strategy. And of course, you highlighted one important component, which is what actually am I variable? What am I going to negotiate? Let me plan for what is achievable and what data do I need before I get in there, etc. But now we're getting, of course, to another very critical point, which is presumably, Ignas, that critical importance of undertaking an objective evaluation of the counterparty and therefore, of course, adjusting your actual plan and strategy according to that analysis. But of course, I guess remaining open to the fact your analysis may have been wrong and you might get a pleasant or unpleasant surprise.
Yes, right. And for this evaluation, how to say, we wanted to put some criteria, whether you can, you know, trust the counterpart. And I would say it wasn't successful because sometimes, and until now, sometimes it's also a stomach feeling, gut feeling. However, we have some critical points. First thing is that the counterpart should be profitable. If it's loss making, it might have too much pressure for sharing and you know, being really transparent. So that's one thing. The other thing, if you want to create a collaboratively shared value, watch out if the counterpart is not heavily incentivized, because if they have pressure on one transaction or 1 year, that might be risky as well. So it's good. It would be good to understand this beforehand.
Right.
Then, of course, experience before, past experience, knowing the person, having good relationship before. These are the things also really, really, really important.
Have you seen in general, Ignas, have there been a greater interest on supply side or client side for the whole concept?
I would say both.
Okay.
Both equally. For us, it's really hard to measure because on the supply side we have 500 counterparts. On the buyer side we have, like, you know, 20, 30.
Right, sure. Okay, great. I think we're almost running out of time, but we have a question from Venkat saying, and this is a question for you, Ignas. When it comes to negotiation with suppliers, what nature of data, market intelligence, etc., can give you an upper hand and help you in better negotiation? Any examples you could share?
I read that same one, Keld, and I was concerned. I think one point here, Venkat, is stop thinking about upper hand. That implies that you're saying, how do I get an advantage that forces them into a deal that's more favorable to me than to them? Which I think we're trying to sort of move away from here as you move towards an environment of greater trust. And I mean, obviously, having good market information, understanding what are norms and to what extent you may want to move away from norms, and being able to explain why movement away from the norm is going to be of mutual benefit. But this, most critically, really, Ignas, is that you agree to go on a journey together, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it's not like know your enemy before the war. It's not like this. Simply you ask for it's not like market intelligence for us. We ask for the support for the supplier for the data. Right. If they're open and transparent, they will give it to you. Sure. I don't see anything wrong of asking you. The other thing, we really, before any negotiation, we go and visit and see what actually what they are doing, what is their quality. So it's more like a, you know, pre-check PPQ, so-called. So know your counterpart, and it's for us. It's a really small, how to say, narrow market, construction industry. So everybody knows these suppliers by heart, actually, in Europe. So it's simple. However, financial information, we just take it from the supplier if he gives it, but in most cases they give it, and you ask questions, they answer.
I have one last question, Ignas, and I know you're not prepared for this one, but you have a woman as CEO. Do you think that has had an impact on your view on negotiation and collaboration in general, compared to if it was a man in that position?
I'm always prepared. That's a great question. I do not think that makes any difference. Like internally, it's more like on personality, not on a gender. Right, because our CEO is like a really visionary person, I would say. So in my view, it's more about personality, embracing innovation, and a bit disrupting the old school construction market.
Yeah, exactly.
These are the key drivers why we are, I would say, successful.
Thank you so much.
Well, the more positive disruption we can create, the better. Hey, Keld.
Yes. That's why we're here. Thank you so much, Ignas. I loved it. It was great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Keld. Thank you, Tim.
No, wonderful, Ignas. Thank you. And thank you very much to our audience once again for a lot of thoughtful feedback, questions, comments, and your willingness to share insights and information as well, because it is so enriching for all of these programs. So we will be back in 2 more weeks, Cal? 23rd. No, 1 more week.
One more week, yeah.
Next week
We're
with
back a week from now.
the third and final in this particular series of the negotiation round. So hope very much you can join us again then. Bye-bye.